Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast. We're glad you're here. And now our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
It's Dr. Mike Patterson, your host of the Mission First People Always podcast, where we talk about what it takes to be a great leader and how to build a great team. I'm glad you're with us. And if you like what you hear on today's episode or any of our past episodes, please leave a review and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. It will help other people find us. Our topic today is how to build a great leadership team, a topic that is perfectly aligned with our purpose here on the Mission First People Always podcast. And it's a fundamental question for every organization. For my entire adult life, I've been thinking about and studying the factors that affect teamwork and performance. Perhaps that's because I've been on some really good teams where everyone enjoyed working together, and together we accomplished some pretty exciting things. And we had fun doing it. And on the rough days, we picked each other up and we addressed those challenges we faced together. I've also been on some teams where everyone seemed to be pulling in opposite directions. We didn't particularly enjoy being together, and our results were not what we expected, not what we wanted. On many days, it wasn't much fun at all, and we saw good people move on as quickly as they could line up another opportunity, because those teams weren't the kind of teams people wanted to be on for any length of time. So out of these personal experiences, I began asking why some teams seem to have that special secret sauce that allows them to attract and retain great people, exceed their performance goals, have everyone get along, and create a truly enjoyable experience for all involved. How are these great teams created? Well, stay tuned, because my guest today has some answers.
Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast, where we talk about better business results, stronger teams, more successful careers, and happier lives. Along the way, we hope to bust some biases, build some bridges, and have some fun. We're glad you're here. And now, our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
My guest today is Jack McGuinness. Jack is an executive coach and co-founder of Relationship Impact, a consulting firm focused on helping organizations build great leadership teams. Jack is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, and he served with the Army's famed 10th Mountain Division. Since leaving active duty, Jack has also been the chief operating officer of a boutique management consulting firm and the CEO of a contract packaging company, as well as an adjunct professor at the Johns Hopkins Carey School of Business. And one of the main reasons Jack is with us today is because he recently released a new book. The book is called Building Great Leadership Teams, a Practical Approach for Unleashing the Full Potential of Your Leadership Team. I thought it was a great book, so I wanted to share it with you. So we're going to invite Jack to unpack some of the big ideas from the book in our Mission First People Always podcast format. So Jack, welcome to the podcast. Glad you're here.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike. It's good to hear and see you again. And I look forward to our discussion.
Yeah, we should probably tell the audience that the co-founder of Relationship Impact is Dr. Gil Brady, a good friend of mine, clearly a good friend of Jack's, all the way back to West Point days. And Gil was on the program several weeks ago. And he was a fan favorite, a big hit. So, Jack, It's good to have the other half of Relationship Impact on the podcast.
Yeah, it's hard to beat him. He's charismatic, smart, and entertaining at the same time.
Yeah, and add good looking to that. So
yeah, exactly.
So you and I can't compete on that.
No.
But we'll do the best we can. So
yeah.
Jack, you've been leading teams and working with teams as a consultant for a long time.
Yep.
Why now? What inspired you to write your book now?
You know, we've been at this for about 13 years now, and you know, every once in a while, someone would say, "Hey, you're going to write a book. You guys got some interesting things you're doing and saying, and your point of view has evolved over the years." So, about 5 years ago, I told myself, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to spend some time at my Bay House and dig in and it was a really fun process, and it really had some good footsteps in that I write for Chief Executive Magazine every other month or so, and it kind of formed the basis for the chapters in the book.
And I would imagine these are ideas and lessons you've shared with clients over the years and in your own leadership practice. So you're bringing things that you've seen work in the field in real life to readers. Is that
yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I think when Gil and I started Relationship Impact, it was really, we thought we had something interesting and potentially very impactful to say about executive teams. And from our perspective, we saw many executive teams get in the way of an organization progressing, and some that helped an organizations accelerate. And so that really was the impetus behind the firm. And and so we kind of documented why we think what executive teams are so important, what are some of the challenges they face, and then what does it look like to build a good one.
Yeah. So you just used the term executive team. We've also in our conversation already used the term leadership team.
Yeah.
Is there a difference? Should we define our terms more clearly?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I use the word leadership team broadly in that the sizes of the companies that we work with are primarily small to mid-sized companies. So the leadership team and the executive team are often interchangeable. However, that being said, we work with, oftentimes we'll work with the next level down in an organization and their teams as well.
Okay.
But it's really focused on, those that are leading the organization.
So what gets in the way? I mean, we have all been on really good teams in the past, and we've been on some teams that were not so good. Some horrible teams led by leaders that weren't very effective. What gets in the way of leadership teams being effective?
I would say the number one thing, and I'm asked this all the time, the number one thing that gets in the way of leadership teams being as effective as they should be and can be, is their inability to engage in what we call productive dialogue. That is the ability to challenge, debate, confront each other in a way that progresses issues and challenges and opportunities, rather than it causes sophomoric strife.
So what do you see as an alternative to productive dialogue? Do you see people going silent and going underground and doing their own thing? Do you see people avoiding the important conversations and not confronting people? What does that look? What does it look like?
It runs the gamut from team members being overly nice to each other and not wanting to hurt each other's feelings, to displaying passive aggressive behavior, to lobbying the CEO and having, we just agreed on something in a meeting, yet we go talk to the CEO and tell him or her why it was such a bad idea. So there's lots of roots behind what lack of productive dialogue looks like, but those are some of the manifestations for sure.
The infamous meeting after the meeting.
Yeah.
I think we've all been there. Yeah. And, in some of many of my speaking events, I will ask the audience if it is safe for members of their teams and their peers and generally their colleagues to respectfully disagree with them. Is that a safe thing to do? And inevitably, the people sitting in the room nod their head, they raise their hand. Yes, of course, it's safe to disagree with me. But then my follow-up question is, would you say the same thing about all the leaders in your organization? And sadly, they shake their head and say, no, probably not. So I think you're on to something here. The inability to what I describe as healthy opposition, the inability of teams to have healthy opposition that is productive and moves us forward is a real problem.
Yeah, it is. And, and it all goes back to the conditions that the team establishes to set itself up to begin with, and I think another big challenge, behind productive dialogue or the effectiveness of any team is the simple fact that many leadership teams are put together because of the functional and technical or business line responsibilities or roles that members of the team have versus their ability to be strong team members. And not a lot of thought goes into what does that look like? What does it look like to be a good executive team member? And how are we going to operate as a leadership team? And I think we just put folks together and we say, go. And that often leads to unintentional consequences.
So is the problem that we don't pause and take the time to talk about how we're going to work together and be effective? And if that's the case, how do you help leadership teams be more effective? Do you create a charter, if you will, that helps people navigate the productive conversations, the anticipating challenging issues that will come up? What exactly do you do to help leadership teams?
Yeah, the first thing we do is help them uncover what's getting in their way from we believe that there's two sides to great leadership teams. One side is the structural dynamics or structural factors, like, do you have the right folks on the team that know how to be good executive team members? Do we have a sense of what problems and challenges we're supposed to be solving together versus as individual functional leads? Do we have a good cadence or rhythm behind how we hold each other accountable? So all those structural kind of things. And then the other side of it is the relational dynamics. Is there a sense of trust? Not so much do we like each other, but do we trust each other so we can engage in that productive dialogue or, disagree well or confront each other and debate well, so that we can actually hold each other accountable. And so it's the dynamics between those two sides of the same coin that we help them uncover, like, where are we out of whack? What is it that's getting in our way? And then we start helping them move to action on what that looks like. And oftentimes what we find is that there are structural challenges that have contributed to finger pointing, confusion about who's supposed to be doing what, that starts chipping away at some of the relational dynamics. And so you try to put new structure in place and people don't necessarily trust it. So it becomes harder. So yeah, the first thing we do is help them figure out, what's getting in the way.
So you use the word trust a couple of times there, Jack. Why is trust so hard? It comes up in many of the sessions I do with teams. We need to work on trust. We need to build trust. We need to trust more. We want our people to trust us. Trust. What's the issue, and how do we build trust? And I know that's not exactly the topic we identified today, but it just jumps out at me so often. Give me your take on building trust.
Yeah, a really, really hard thing to repair, number one. And unfortunately, one of the foundational elements that gets in the way of teams being as effective as they can. If you don't trust each other, it's really hard to really engage in authentic interaction, dialogue with each other. So, and we think that trust has a few components to it. There's the trust in people's capabilities. There's trust in people's character. And unfortunately, what happens, and this gets into a lot of the work that you've done in your career, there's a lot of assumptions that we all make about each other, about our character or about our capabilities that are based on how we see the world. And sometimes those assumptions or observations are accurate, but most of the time they're not. And that really chips away at an individual's ability to trust each other. So two things that we do to begin the journey to build or rebuild trust are, number one is creating a common language like strengths deployment inventory, core strengths, is really important. Getting folks to understand how they see the world, what they're motivated by, and how that's different from other folks. I know that's a cliche thing. A lot of people say, oh yeah, we've done that Myers-Briggs stuff or whatever. I mean, to me, it is foundational, creating a common language for folks to be able to talk to each other about what motivates them and how that's different from what might motivate someone else is really important. The second thing, and potentially the most challenging, is spending time with each other at another level of dialogue, another level of interaction, engagement with each other over time, that gets folks to understand the journeys that we have taken and the trials and tribulations that we've all gone through that have created who we are and created our fears, created our strengths, created our, how we approach things. And if you do tend to take the time to do that and get to know people at another level, it creates a sense of patience, and it creates a sense of opportunity to chip away at the assumption making problem that we see get in the way.
Yeah, I'm always amazed, whether it's in a workplace context or a church, a ministry context, or just a general life context. Everybody has a story. And when you take the time to really hear their story, hear them out, you can't help but move toward them to have a sense of appreciation for who they are at a much deeper level. Because the problem is, at least in my experience, is the stories I tell about people aren't always accurate. There's almost always more to the story than I know. And so I think it is so important, as you said, that we take the time to hear that other person's story and really grow our sense of appreciation for who they are, how they got here, and how valuable they are as a human being. I mean, they're a contributor to the team, of course, but man, they're a human being. They have inherent value, and that's what I'm always amazed by, how that is unlocked, it seems, when we hear their stories.
Yeah, and I think, and the other challenge is I was just working with, I had one of the executive teams I'm working with out to my Bay House and for a few days last week, and they have a new member on their team. And so when you add a new member, you have a new team. And so we went through some dialogue, some discussions, generally fairly informal, around what are those journeys that each of us has. And it does shed some light on why people behave the way they do. And I'm not suggesting that gives them the right to be a jerk or whatever, but it does explain some stuff, and it gives you the opportunity to be able to have some more, to have some patience and to have some more intimate dialogue with someone that gets at what's going on. I'll give you a good example. Is I won't disclose the organization, but the one of the executives on this team, she basically was raised by a single parent who had drug issues and had trouble holding a home, down. And basically she, as a teenager, sort of raised herself and took care of her mom, and is, to some respects, still taking care of her mom, put herself through school, rose the ranks in an organization, So if you just think about the challenges associated with her life experience, it gives you some insights into why she is a perfectionist, why she is so passionate about getting things right, why she sometimes has a fear of being wrong, or it's all those types of things that come with that kind of upbringing.
Yeah.
That type of disclosure really gives folks an opportunity to see people with a different lens.
Yeah, and it brings a new level of not only understanding but respect, and for me, a sense of gratitude at the opportunities I had, and I didn't have to deal with that, and it sort of softens my heart toward people who overcame some big challenges. So that's a great example. Now, Jack, let's just get really foundational here. Why should we care about these leadership teams, executive teams? I know there's sort of an assumption that everybody understands why they're so important, but maybe some of the listeners are relatively new to the workforce. They're recently out of school. They're just jumping into their careers and looking way up toward the top of the organization. And there's several levels between them and where those folks at the top are. Why are leadership teams so important?
I think they set the tone culturally, values wise, for the organizations they lead. And, I'm not talking about the written values on a wall, I'm talking about how they behave with each other, how they behave with the teams that they lead. Really sets the foundation for how the organization ultimately interacts with each other, and internally and externally. And so that's a powerful responsibility, and one that the good stuff bleeds down to the rest of the organization, and so does the not so good stuff. So if you have two executives that are at each other's throats, that run, to sales and warehousing, for example, and you will almost always see that bleed down into how those organizations behave with each other and interact with each other. And that's why they're so important.
Yeah, absolutely. That leadership team is the creator of culture, and that culture trickles down from the top. I agree. Now, the promise of your book is building great leadership teams, a practical approach for unleashing the full potential of your leadership team. So what does it take to build a great leadership team, and what's the leader's role? There's probably some folks listening today who lead organizations, who are on that executive team. What is that leader's role in building that great team around them?
Yeah, over the years, Gil and I, particularly when we first got started, we had this nirvana hope, I think it was, that leadership teams you don't really need the formal leader to be, a quote good leader. But unfortunately, that's we've been proven wrong in that over and over again, in that leaders, the formal team leader, whether it's the CEO, the president, if you're on a leadership team, the sales leadership team, whatever it might be, they establish the conditions that the team operates under, either both formally and informally. So how they model a few important behaviors is really critical. For example, if they are good at receiving feedback and really truly listening and receiving feedback well from the folks who work for them, and they're a leadership team. So, usually most of the folks work for the formal team leader. So if they're good at receiving feedback, the opportunity for others to learn how to receive feedback well increases dramatically. If they're on the other side of it, if they're good at providing feedback in a constructive, direct, and empathetic way, that ability to learn how to do that well increases as well. If they're so it goes on and on, but those are giving and receiving feedback, I think is absolutely essential. There's some great books out there, and there's like Psychological Safety by, what's her name? Last name is Edmondson, I think. It's foundational. Like you can, if you don't create an environment where people can actually talk to each other without feeling they're judged or going to be attacked or cut loose or whatever, it's almost not even worth spending much time doing anything.
So I think what you're saying, Jack, is whether we intend to or not, we are modeling the behavior that we will see in those around us if we're the senior leader, and we are always leading by example. So the question is, do we lead well, or do we set a bad example? I mean, I think
that's right. Yeah, that's said a lot simpler than I did. Yes.
Yeah, and the same is true for parents. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah,
absolutely true at home. Your kids are always watching. Your coworkers are always watching. Somebody's always watching, and that behavior you're exhibiting will probably be mirrored in them at some point. So, Jack, you are a consultant. You and I make a living by going into organizations and helping them perform better. And how is it that you measure the effectiveness of your work? What causes, after an engagement, people to give you a big high five or handshake and hug and say, Jack, this was great. You've helped us a lot. How do you measure that?
Yeah, so it's very simply put, we do an assessment up front of like I said, the structural and relational dynamics. When we do that, we have the direct reports of the executive or leadership team take that same assessment. Sometimes the board will have take it as well, and so it paints a picture of where they are now. It creates a baseline, and then we do that 6 months in and towards the end of the work that we do. And it's really what's the right way to put it? It's a subjective way of measuring, or an objective way of measuring something that's somewhat fairly subjective. It's up to them to define what it is that they want their team to look like, and then for them to determine if they've moved the needle or not.
Jack, so let's make it practical and give folks an immediate application idea. What is one thing our listeners could begin doing right now to build a better leadership team, assuming that they are leaders?
Yeah, I think one thing to do is just go back to your team and ask a few simple questions. Structurally, do we know what it takes, each of us, to be effective leadership team members? Number two, do we have a good rhythm or cadence behind us? Number three, do we understand the problems and challenges we're supposed to be solving as a team? On the other side, do we have a sense of trust? Not so much do we like each other, but do we trust each other? Capabilities and character. Are we able to engage in productive dialogue with each other? And number three, do we actually hold each other accountable without just the CEO or the formal team leader involved? And just do a quick back of the envelope assessment with your team and see what that looks like.
Now, I assume these are the ideas that you talk about in your book.
They exactly are, yes.
All right. Well, that's why we're here. We're here to hear Jack describe what is in this great new book of his, Building Great Leadership Teams, a practical approach for unleashing the full potential of your leadership team. And that book, I believe, is available on Amazon, most certainly, and probably wherever you get your books these days, digitally at least.
That's right.
Go out and buy that book. Jack, we're going to have your contact information in the show notes, but what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you?
Yes. So the easiest way to get in touch with me is on my website. It's relationship-impact.com. You can buy the book there. You can reach out to me there. A whole bunch of resources for building great teams on that site. Yeah, that would be the best way to do it.
So friends, check out the Relationship Impact website. Check out the book. Jack, thanks for being a great guest on the Mission First People Always podcast, and best wishes, great success with this new book.
Thanks so much, Mike. I really appreciate the opportunity. It was a great conversation.
Excellent. So let me just wrap things up here with some thoughts, my thoughts about our conversation. Today's political, social, and economic climate makes it more difficult than ever for organizations to balance sustained performance with a healthy working environment. But in today's world of work, we need mission first, people always leaders who can balance people's needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness with the organization's performance requirements now more than ever. And it's the truly great leadership team who can create and maintain this important balance and model it, just like we were talking about, for frontline leaders throughout the enterprise. And that's why we need to continue having these conversations, these thoughtful conversations with folks like Jack, and why you need to keep listening. Remember, people and performance always go hand in hand, and you can't have one without the other. So let's take a balanced approach and achieve extraordinary results. And we'll tell you how to do just that here on the Mission First People Always podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe or follow, leave a good review, tell a friend, and come back to listen to every episode. Until next time, go out and do great things with, through, and for.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to create a stronger, more people-centric and empowered culture for your organization, visit drmikepatterson.com.